It's that time of the year again, the Gay Awards, and it's tiresome how poorly this show is handled each year. You might ask, well, why care about it anyway? Sadly, I think it's true to say that this garbage is unfortunately the biggest gaming event of the year. E3 died, and people mostly watch for new major reveals because we got nothing else. I don't hate the idea of the Game Awards, but the vibe of it. What I mean by vibe is the whole wannabe Hollywood Oscars and Grammys vibe. Like, come on, Geoff, gaming is the biggest entertainment medium in the world. It doesn't need to be aping that shit and wasting money having washed up celebrities making minute-long announcements. Gamers could care less about bringing some form of prestige to this hobby. But speaking of Oscars and Grammys, Geoff wanted to trademark a generic title like the Game Awards, which is just retarded. Not much to say about that. I think he should call it Geoff's Game Awards, similar to how the Oscars as well debatably named after a person. GGA's has a nice ring to it, or call it the Goy Awards. I don't know, dude. Just something more original. Like, why would he even try to trademark something so basic? What are you, Nintendo? Let's talk about core problems that'll never be fixed. First, I genuinely hate how game reveals are handled at the TGAs. They just spam back-to-back reels of trailers that make everything blend together. You don't have enough time to process what you watched before it instantly goes into the next one. I can barely remember any of these games after the show ends, bro. I think Geoff just needs to cut some of the ones that are very samey. Summer Games Fest has a similar issue. They just need to trim the fat or space out games of a similar genre better. Despite its problems, E3 was just better. You would have a day for Microsoft, Sony, Ubisoft, Nintendo, etc. Enough time to digest what you saw before the next day. It being a whole week was just fun. My point is, unlike those events though, TGA's has to balance out reveals, award nominations, ads, musical performances, and speeches within a much more limited time, a single day even, and a few hours at that. Remember the whole wrap it up controversy? While I agree some acceptance speeches can go on for too long, it's a bad look though that developers and people who worked on games don't have more than like a minute to talk to the audience at an event that is supposed to be celebrating their work. The show has an identity crisis where it's trying to juggle being a game showcase, spamming reveals, and an award show celebrating games of the past year by blowing through some of the nominations in like a minute. This whole structure sucks ass and feels schizophrenic. Moving on, I have to mention the 90% journos versus the 10% actual audience. You know, the people who keep this entire industry afloat. I took notice of it around The Last of Us 2 controversy when it just kept sweeping everything despite how many fans disliked it. But what else can I add to this that we already don't know? Your vote just does not matter whatsoever. The shithead journos do not represent the actual vast gaming audience. Most of them are activists and shills who are bought and paid for. They live in their own bubble, spending more time sowing discourse with rage bait and random political nonsense articles, smear campaigns like what they did to Stellar Blade and Wukong, or just straight up lies like Concord and Dragon Age Vile Guard being anything more than a 3 out of 10. I find it funny how they are all about my representation, multiple voices and diversity, yet make gamers the literal vocal minority, dude. Some of the judges aren't even gaming outlets, only adding to the activist issue with this industry. Easy big brain fixes I'd do if I was in charge. Audience vote makes up 80% for who wins each category, while video game, I repeat, only video game outlets make up 20%. Journos would complain about how it would be just a popularity contest if the audience vote actually mattered. Well, good. What is the point of having thousands upon millions of votes if they can just get that easily disregarded? It's not like the Game Awards are really clearing out the whole mine for hidden gems or anything. Bro, it's the same handful of popular to mildly known games being used throughout each category. If you were to look at this in a less informed vacuum, you'd think, wow, there weren't a lot of games that came out this year. I would so get rid of the filler categories. All the Eat Sports gets axed because who cares? Along with Content Creator of the Year, I mean, I don't know any of these people except Pecora, who didn't even know she was nominated for this, by the way. Games for Impact and Accessibility, also known as the woke category, only journos care about. Yeah, that can go away too. Bro, why are there two indie categories? Best independent and best indie. Everything else seems fine, but a rule I would set in stone many people could agree on is DLC is not eligible for any award besides best ongoing. DLC itself is not standalone and you need the original game to play it. I shouldn't have to explain that, and it just makes it seem like they ran out of new games to include when they put it in categories, especially Game of the Year. For Game of the Year, I would have swapped out Astro Bot for Stellar Blade just because it's an original new IP from Sony that is actually good, and because Astro Bot already has enough nominations. I get it, Sony, you want people to forget about Concord, but it doesn't work. These are both better than Sony's previous stuff like Fridge Man 2, The Last of Us 2, God of Snore, Ragnarok. Man, what is with Sony and bad sequels? Elden Ring DLC I would have replaced with Space Marine 2, which I honestly think got snubbed. Balatro being there, I mostly find pretty sus. To me, it feels like that spot was probably Power World, which is great, but of course Geoff excluded it from everything because of the Nintendo patent nonsense. Isn't the first time he's excluded something because of controversy. It was spineless as hell to exclude Hogwarts Legacy because a handful of troons on Twitter tried to boycott it over a false idea that J.K. Rowling was involved. Real scummy thing to do to the devs, but at least it was the highest selling game of that year, and as a Harry Potter fan I thought it was alright. But with Power World I can at least understand Geoff not wanting to get roped into legal drama, or maybe Nintendo would be petty enough to threaten to not allow their games at the awards or whatever. There's Trans Age the Groomguard, which journals desperately wanted to be this year's Baldur's Gate 3, but it didn't even come close. I'm shocked they had the balls to only include it in one category, which is the disability category of all things. Was expecting it to be in every category and just sweep, but they showed restraint this time. So best narrative, I would have just swapped out Hellblade, which nobody played, let's be honest, with Mouthwashing, a pretty good game that you should play if you haven't. Warframe should have been in best ongoing, yet they keep excluding it and putting Diablo there. I would add the First Descendant to that category, or at least multiplayer, since I've been enjoying that gameplay despite the monetization aspect, but I mean it's a free online game in current year, it's expected. How does KH4, Kingdom Hearts 4 not make the most anticipated category? I mean I could just go on, man, but I don't feel like it. I just wish the nominations represented the entire year of gaming releases better, but it would require osmosis and being able to read the room for what gamers mostly think should be in the running for these categories. Anyway, for fun, I'll end on my predictions for only the nominations I'm interested in. Best fighting game? I chose Dragon Ball because I love Dragon Ball, but it's also the one I think could win because more people played it the most compared to the others. Best RPG, I voted for Metaphor. I don't even really like it that much, it's pretty bland and kind of overrated. It's just Persona with a job system and a more on-the-nose preachy messaging about lay society, which is about as deep as a puddle. Oh yeah, and no problematic dating aspect, even though said people whining about that were just mad because you couldn't be a fag in Persona 5. It's just mid, but easily better than the other options like Dragon Smegma 2, which is the biggest drop ball and disappointment of the year by far. As someone who loves the first game, I hope this doesn't win, and it won't because I predict Elden Ring winning this, even though journals did nothing but bitch about its difficulty and how it needed an easy mode. They will choose it because it's the safe gamer approved option, yet I do think Metaphor could win if the whole DLC debacle scares them. For action game, I chose Stellar Blade. It's a non-movie slop game made under Sony that is actually good, but no way will journals allow it to win anything. The same for Wukong. Space Marine is too masculine for them, so I predict Helldivers 2 winning this since it was extremely popular earlier this year. Best indie should be UFO 50, but I predict Baltro, however you say it, will win. Best soundtrack, I voted for Stellar Blade. It has a really good soundtrack that gives me Near vibes, which it was obviously inspired by. Unfortunately, I predict Metaphor will take this, even though its soundtrack is one of the weakest to ever come from Atlas, especially compared to SMT or Persona. It just doesn't even come close. For best art direction, I voted for Wukong, mainly because I really love those 2D or stop motion animated cinematics, and when the game isn't burning my PC to shreds, it looks really amazing graphically. But once again, I predict Metaphor will win this because of fancy menus, even though the rest of the game looks like a PS3 game and I had issues running it on my PS5. Game of the year. I voted for Wukong. It's an impressive game from a little Who studio out of CCP land, but it's guaranteed after the smear campaign to not win. I hope I'm wrong and it pulls through, but I'm gonna have to go with predicting the card game will win. As like a quirky haha XD moment, Metaphor would be my second prediction, not because of gameplay, but purely because the journos consider it woke, since the game doesn't say racism is good, and as payback for Dragon Age Wallet Guard being a laughingstock. Elden Ring DLC, despite all the complaining, would be my third prediction choice, but only if it wins in other categories, because if it does that despite the DLC stigma, then it's guaranteed to sweep across the board. As for the others, Astrobot is good but not Game of the Year good, and Rebirth, well, it's 2/3 of a trilogy that is a sequel to a bait and switch remake that isn't actually a remake but a compilation sequel, and it's padded to hell and back with forgettable 30-something mini-games. The combat is also mediocre and shallow. It's a complete joke really, but that's it. Here's my card. So for the categories I didn't mention, I just chose random shit. Honestly, gonna watch this slop only for the 2% chance of Kingdom Hearts 4 trailer, but I'm just gonna get out of here. I'll see you when I see you.